Hello, hello. Welcome to the Pure Desire Podcast on YouTube. I am your host, Trevor Windsor. This is a weekly podcast helping you take back your life from the effects of unwanted sexual behavior and betrayal trauma. Sexual brokenness impacts us all, men and women who are stuck in shame and are unsure if healing is actually possible. Church leaders who want to help but don't know where to start. Parents who don't know how to help their kids develop sexual integrity. Wherever you're at, this podcast is for you. Through sharing stories of healing, interviewing addiction and betrayal experts, and normalizing the conversation on sexuality, we offer a clear plan for recovery and healing from the effects of unwanted sexual behavior and betrayal trauma. You have what it takes to break free, heal your relationships, and take back your life. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It helps us so much and really just pushes our message forward. All right, with that, let's get to this week's episode. Jason, Mathew, welcome to the Pure Desire Podcast, man. Thanks for being with us for the first time.
Thanks, guys. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you and I have got to spend a little bit of time on the phone, chatting it up a little bit. We nerded out a little bit on marketing and some business stuff. We'll get into the organization that you're a part of, but kind of in conjunction with that, we wanted to look at our digital patterns and how specifically those connect to unwanted sexual behaviors. And I'm really excited about this conversation. This is not a conversation we've had yet, at least for a full episode. So I'm excited to get into it. But as you're new on the podcast, can you just introduce yourself to our listeners, give some background on your story and your organization, Lead Me Not?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jason Mathew, I'm a product manager at IBM. So that's my full-time job. I work with engineers and designers to create automation software and technologies, but I was also founded and the CEO of Lead Me Not, which is a digital wellness platform that we created to help the world overcome unhealthy and destructive digital habits. And, we've talked about it and I'm very vocal and open about my story regarding kind of what was the impetus to create Lead Me Not. And, as I look at my walk as a Christian growing up in the church and kind of my understanding of not just what is sin or kind of what does it mean to honor God in everything that I'm doing in life and being discipled and discipling others, that was kind of my road towards conviction of certain behaviors and the way I was living grew over time. And it was whether it first was with drinking or second was with the music I listened to. And as it related to my experiences with sexuality and dating, that was probably the last thing, but the biggest, right? Where in 2018, I just moved to Austin, Texas, and the Lord just really convicted me of, hey, I've been using dating apps and technology, which I get into, to act out physically with women, and through that process got started with recovery through my church in Austin. And through that process of sitting and walking with guys and having a sponsor, starting using software to try and curb my behavior, and realized like, hey, this isn't really fitting my use case, and asked the question like, is there, and as a technologist, like, hey, is there a better way of doing this, right? And like, where did this come from? How did this stuff start? And how do I now make this work for me?
Yeah.
But then is there actually other people out there where they need something, quote unquote, better, more effective? And that kind of started down the journey of where Lead Me Not came from, the vision.
Yeah. Is it weird that like he says he works for IBM and I just immediately think he's a big deal? I'm just like, oh my gosh, so much smarter than everyone else. For some reason knows how to do things no one else does. It's like a magic trick. I don't know. Is it spiritual gifting? I'm not sure.
Dude, no.
Well, he is developing a digital platform, so that already puts him in a sphere of understanding beyond what I comprehend. So, yeah, I think, Jason, we're really excited to have this conversation because it is an area that it feels like, whether inside the church or outside the church, pretty much every single person in our culture is impacted by social media and apps and the webs, all the different websites people visit. And it's an area where I've always heard it said, we tend to be asking, can we do this? And not enough people are asking, should we do this? And so things just develop in the digital world at a faster and faster pace. It's like, oh, look what we can do, look what we can do. And then all of us have developed these habits or patterns of how we interact with social media and apps and our cell phones and all of that. And it seems like, what you're talking about here is how do we use those in a way that's healthy? So define, what do you mean by digital wellness? Can you define that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I initially tried defining that by myself, and then I had to kind of lean on different resources of like, hey, what's a smart way of defining this?
There we go.
Uh, this is less smart and more just, I think it's right to the point. It's how do I interact with technology in a intentional and healthy way, right?
Yeah.
And what does the pursuit of that healthy behavior and intentionality look like? And probably in the broadest sense, that's what we could define. And then when you drill down deeper, there was a diagram that I saw that really articulates well kind of what I've been trying to verbalize, not just to myself and even to those that I talk to about digital wellness, and even especially to our users, is, man, like, hey, what are these areas that digital wellness affects and impacts? And it's the spiritual, the mental, the physical, the social, the intellectual, and then you have this idea of like safety and privacy as well, right? And each of those things are really different. But if my goal is to optimize all 6 of these, or maybe one or a combination of some of these, then, I think that's really the goal is, hey, how do we intentionally interact with technology, and what does the pursuit of that look like? But also in the context of these kind of 6 core areas of our life. And probably what you hear most frequently is kind of the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual.
Yeah.
But I like this kind of more holistic approach of looking at all these areas.
That's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, reading about, and exercising just in my life over the last few years. And it's funny too, because I think about technology. Like this morning I woke up and I worked out and I used the Apple Fitness Plus platform, which is a technology platform that's on my phone. And I I screen share it to my TV and I watch it and can do it. So like, for me, that is an area where digital wellness is taking place. I'm using it something that, because I love what you're saying, it's a holistic view of who I am as a person. Are the ways I'm using technology enhancing or bettering myself in all of these ways that make up a holistic human being? And I think that that's really what, as I was thinking about this question in general, that's just something I've experienced. So I love where you're coming from with that holistic thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of us view our technology as being kind of neutral. And I think the reality is that we either serve our technology or the technology serves us. And that's where I feel like we're not asking the question, is this helping me? Is this something I should be doing versus something I can do? And so I love your definition there. What is intentional and what is healthy? So that at the end of the day, we do feel like technology really serves me. It helps me live the kind of life I want to live with the people I want to live it with, and doesn't end up sucking kind of a part of my life out. And now I'm serving the technology in a way that is unhealthy. And I think what we're here to really try to highlight today is, for many of us, if it stays in that sphere of kind of being, we think of it as neutral, we tend to engage in patterns before we've even thought about, is this healthy or not? And then by the time we figure out that it is unhealthy, we're so deep into it, it's really hard to imagine our life without it. I even think of guys as I do group with them, and we're talking about our need to establish healthy guardrails, and the thought of like, hey, maybe you need to get rid of your smartphone for a while. And it's like, I can't even comprehend a life without that, because it's so integrated into my life that now I'm at a point I can't even imagine how to do life without it. And I think that's maybe an extreme example of a lot of the ways we use technology is we can get so deep into it that we just don't know how to live differently. But sometimes we need to, if it's really creating a lot of unhealth and a lack of intentionality.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think even that point about, I know we're going to get into this, but it's like, hey, like, what are the questions we're asking ourselves, and what are the things that we need to be super aware of, and again, intentional in asking ourselves, and maybe asking others, or being asked around really poking and prodding at figuring out, is this truly an unhealthy behavior? And I think that, we'd all agree that's true for anything, if it's offline or online. And because there's clearly ways where you can use, like you said, your Apple smartwatch, you're optimizing your physical health, hopefully not to the point of idolizing or like obsessing over every metric and data point.
Yeah. Yeah, I try not to. Anyways, I'm working on it. But let's kind of get into that, because we're already kind of answering this question a little bit, but we all have these patterns, specifically digital patterns. What is it that makes a digital pattern healthy or unhealthy? Like, where's that line? How do we distinguish between the two?
Yeah. So, when I was going through recovery at the Austin Stone in Austin, Texas, there was one of our large groups we had dedicated towards an assessment of determining, like, how does someone know if they're addicted to alcohol? And I went back and I couldn't find the original assessment, but I reached out and I got it. I just want to read some of these questions. It's like a 100-question screener. So I have used alcohol, or it's actually alcohol or drugs. I've used alcohol or drugs to a degree that impaired my judgment or self-control. When using alcohol or drugs, I've embarrassed myself or damaged my reputation. I've been a poor steward of my time due to my consumption of alcohol or drugs, or managing difficult emotions has become a reason I used alcohol or drugs. You probably see where I'm going with this. Yeah. I went back to that because I said, man, you could replace alcohol or drugs with any technology and you'll get almost exactly the same response, right? For me, managing difficult emotions has become a reason I used Tinder or online dating. I've become a poor steward of my time due to my consumption of Facebook, Instagram. I mean, insert anything. And I think that's the part that, I mean, there's a lot of guys I hold accountable through Lead Me Not that have taken me up on my offer to be a partner. And guys will ask me, like, hey, is this a healthy or unhealthy thing? Someone just messaged me over the weekend saying, hey, I think I want to listen to music while I go to sleep over the 6 to 7 hours that I'm asleep. Like, is that okay? And I was thinking, I was like, at first I thought it was a little silly, of like, oh, of course it's okay. Like, why? But then I thought about it and said, well, the way he described his story and kind of even his questioning of, hey, should I be listening to music as I'm going to sleep? It's, hey, yeah, there's absolutely a world where that consumption could be seen as unhealthy if it impaired your judgment, if you're embarrassing. I mean, whatever those are, right? There's n number of ways that could be true, but I think to truly understand if something's healthy or unhealthy, you have to really ask yourself of, is this hindering me and those around me in some way? And I think sometimes it can be a really obvious answer, like, hey, I've spent, and this is not an exaggeration, right? I've spent 2 hours on YouTube when I should have been working on some assignment for work or for school. And we see kind of the domino effect of that. And I think some things are more subtle of, hey, the 10 minutes I check my phone in the morning is actually, before I get up and started, is actually throwing me off completely. And so you have to be super intentional at, you're trying to figure out the right questions, and even just being open about what you're doing and the implications of that too.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing out is that a lot of these questions, these patterns are unique to us. And I think that's what makes what you're doing so powerful. You're trying to put in someone's hands that ability to start to discern in their story, in their pattern, in the kind of life they want to live, is something healthy for you or not. Because for and I think there are definitely areas that we'd all generally agree, like, okay, if you're doing these certain behaviors, just like with drugs and alcohol, we'd all say, if you're ever getting into a vehicle and operating it while impaired, that's a really unhealthy, scary behavior, and everyone would say you need to change. Yeah. But in another question, like you said, well, if I'm at a social context and I have 2 beers, is that unhealthy? Well, one person might say absolutely yes, and another person would say, for me, no. And I think that with technology, we're in kind of that same place, that there are apps that I know because of my story, the things that trigger me, and even ways that I've acted out in the past, I have to stay off those apps. I can't. Right. But another person will say, oh, that's not an issue for me at all. And they'll bring up another app, and I'm like, I've never even thought of struggling. Like that's not a part of my story. And it seems odd because maybe even, for 2 people like that, we have similar stories of like, what is a trigger? But just because of where we've gone to in the past to find whether it's pornography or unhealthy things, our pathways just look different. And I think having that healthy self-awareness of what is it for me, what defines health or unhealth is going to be some individual responses. And I think we're just wise to start looking at our life through that grid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think two things that came to mind when talking about healthy or unhealthy is how do you tend to feel about yourself after you've partaken? You know, if it's something that you do, you know, and maybe it is have 2 beers at an outing, or maybe it is scroll Facebook or Instagram for 30 minutes. If at the end you find yourself beating yourself up and feeling shame, I think that's worth exploring. Like, why do you feel that way? Is it that you're procrastinating and that you know you're trying to escape? Like, you know, I think that there's something to be said about how I feel about myself in that situation. But then the other thing is this thing that I'm doing, is it pushing me toward connection with other people, like living vulnerably with others around me, or is it isolating me from those relationships? And I think that, in my mind, is the biggest indicator if something is healthy or unhealthy. Because, you know, you look at pornography, that is not a habit that tends to push us into deeper connection with other people. That's something that pulls us away and isolates us out of fear and shame and guilt and whatever. And so I think that where we're at on the scale, or at least is this pushing me, you know, toward connection or away from connection? And how we answer that question, I think, helps evaluate, is a digital pattern healthy or unhealthy?
Right. I love it. You guys are right.
Yeah. So this might seem kind of obvious to some, but let's talk a little bit more about this side of it, is how do our digital patterns connect specifically to unwanted sexual behavior? How do you describe those connections?
Yeah, so similar to as you put it in this last one, is like, in a way, it really depends on the individual.
Yep.
And, you know, we all have patterns that can be unhealthy or healthy. And then similarly, we all have different triggers of what could lead to unwanted sexual behavior. And when the Lord put this vision of Lead Me Not on my heart, a lot of the motivation outside of me saying, you know, I didn't feel like there was this could fit my use case, that was paired with me sitting in an open share group, number of open share groups with guys, right? And I was not there for research. I was there for myself. But hearing the same, like, I'm not even kidding, like, guy after guy, week after week, like, hey, I was on YouTube. I was just innocently scrolling. And then, you know, I was watching some not so innocent videos. And then, you know, I found myself on Pornhub. And then someone else was like, you know, I was on Reddit. I was looking up this answer to this question. Like, it was really on my mind. And then I saw this ad, and then I saw this not safe for work thread. And then, like, oh, I was on, like, RedTube. And it's like, that's when I started like, man, we all have these patterns. And how do we start to understand what those patterns are, but then figure out the why of where all this is happening? And then I was like trying to find, like, man, I wonder if anyone's done research on this. I couldn't find anything. And then I started reading Unwanted by Jay Stringer, which, you know, you all know very well. And within the first chapter, or probably the first few pages, Jay talks about how sexual brokenness is not random, right? And there's this example of one of his clients that was really into, I think it was like domination pornography. And when he dug deeper, realized or determined that this particular client had a very domineering and abusive mother, right? And I forget the exact language, but like making these connections. And right, so, like, you know, Jay then talks about our family roots and a lot, like, the different types. But I think the point there, though, is that, hey, if sexual brokenness is not random given our past, right, then similarly, what we're doing online and how we are engaging with digital unwanted sexual behavior is also not random, because even these things that are leading us towards it, even if they are so evident or so obvious of like, well, you're on Reddit and you're like, of course you're going to eventually run into some stuff.
Right.
That even the fact that you're on Reddit that late at night or on YouTube can be for things that you may think are random that aren't, right? Because like, hey, this is your coping mechanism, or this is a way, some form of escapism. And
right.
And then, you know, that's where we get into ideas of triggers. And hey, are we being
Hmm.
introspective?
Yeah.
And can you even in your mind even predict of like, hey, this is a rabbit hole that if I know I go down here, I could high chance I'm eventually going to end up in a place I don't want to be.
Yeah. I don't know why, but the Child's Game Shoots and Ladders is just coming to my head right now. That
Hmm.
like Instagram for me was that place on the board that was like a shoot. Like as soon as I hit it, I was down. Yeah,
The
and it
long
just
slide.
Yeah.
same thing with Twitter, and it is. And I think that that's how it connects. Is one of the ways that we describe it. The language we use is the matrix of addiction in Seven Pillars of
Yes.
Freedom for Men. But this idea that I have a pattern that I tend to go back to time and time again. And if we can
Right.
identify that pattern, and that's the whole premise of what we're talking about today, if we can identify that, then I know where to start. Like I know what to pay attention to. And I think that that's how
Right.
it connects. And I know we'll get into it even more so in the next, couple of questions, how to start
Sure.
making changes. But I really do think that number one, I would just say start with this: the digital sphere or the internet or however you want to view it in so many ways is like the playground where brokenness just can like run havoc, and it's accessible all the time from anywhere, any device, any of that. And so I think we have to approach that even before we get to our patterns. We have to approach that with the level of like, honestly, it's kind of this like, I'm not Superman. I can't get online and not have any guardrails in place and plan to succeed. Like it's just not going to go well.
Right.
So I think we need to
Right.
understand what we're getting into. But then our patterns, it's funny. I didn't think this until I got into group, but it was the same every single time. It might have been one of two different apps, but it was social media. Like that was something would happen. I would feel bad. I would end up scrolling. And then within a week, I would end up on a pornography site. And so I just think that that's what's so important about identifying it is if we were to actually map it out, we'd see that the pattern is very similar
Oh.
every time.
Yeah.
We've talked about it on the podcast that it is always better to do work at the beginning of our pattern, not at the end.
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
maybe especially in churches, we do still focus on, fighting at the end of your pattern of when you're at that step right before whatever it is you've promised God, yourself, or others you wouldn't do. Like, boy, that's the moment to be a man or to be a person of integrity or to have character and just get up and walk away or say no. And I mean, I think it's good that we try to encourage that, but as we've pointed out, like from the brain science side and this pattern side and all the learning that every time we repeat a pattern, our brain learns from it and cements it, and it's easier to repeat the next time. So that by the time we get to that point, like we're fighting the runaway freight train, we're fighting, the boulders that are already rolling downhill, and the chances of success are just so minimal. And it's not a way that we can go, oh, well, I'm not responsible, I couldn't help it. But to say, man, that is not the place to start fighting is when the avalanche is already coming downhill. It's like, figure out what's that first rock that got tossed that hit all the other ones.
Right.
And then don't throw that first rock or don't start the engine of that train. And as we think about those things and we move in healthy directions instead, I know for some guys and women, it can almost feel like, well, this isn't even fighting because I don't even... I don't feel like I'm having to battle temptation. It's like, well, yeah, that's the point.
Whole point.
We're trying to not have you get to that point where you're now in this intense, physical, emotional, spiritual battle to say no to something. You're just realizing I don't ever even want to get to that place. And so I think it is all in going to the starting point of saying, where am I at? What are the places I go to? What are the feelings I have to be aware of? And then starting to construct a different pattern that in a similar way can also be repeated by our brain and get stronger and stronger over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So, Jason, in your work, like how do we recognize these patterns? I mean, like what tools or what assessments or what wisdom have you kind of gathered on your journey in starting Lead Me Not and where you're at now? What are some ways that people can start to recognize these digital patterns they have?
Yeah. So, outside of first and foremost is as we've been talking about, and even I think Nick, as you were saying, right, got to ask yourself the question. Just starts with like, hey, well, what am I using? Pretty on like just practically speaking, where am I spending most of my time? And you have, on iOS we have screen time that like will literally just list out for you, and then Android has some built-in functionality as well, just to show you this is where you are. But I think like I would like to think even the average person is not that unaware of what websites they spend the most time on and which apps they're consuming the most of, right? And we're not there yet with Lead Me Not, but a big part of this vision and mission is leveraging technology in a way to enhance, like, we want to help people get to the why and the root as part of that overcoming and fighting what's destructive and unhealthy. And I think one really powerful and cool way to do that is using AI, right? Artificial intelligence to like make sense out of all this data. Jay in his book also talks about in the first chapter about like, hey, our internet search history and our browser activity is like, can be very telling of what we're doing. And I'm not going to suggest someone like, well, go analyze the last 1 week and, and look through the, thousands of entries. You could do that, and I'm sure you could find some really cool trends, but again, the obvious things are going to be obvious of like, man, I spend a lot of time on Facebook or TikTok or Insta or LinkedIn. And I mean, it's funny for me, I'll talk more about this shortly, but as I've cut out more and more stuff out of my life, if people are, are you on social media? I'm like, man, the only social media I'm on now is LinkedIn. And what's funny about LinkedIn is like, it's just a few minutes a day. It's not satisfying the same desires or urges of what Facebook did, which I think is good. But it's funny because I'll still go to LinkedIn, I think, just to like, hey, what's new? What's out there? Right? Like, the intentions are different. But yeah, so I think you got to do the work internally and ask yourself, and you're not going to be that. I think the obvious stuff's going to be obvious. The non-obvious things, I don't have an answer yet as to like, hey, what technologies I pray that Lead Me Not will be able to bring the non-obvious things to light. And then also assessment wise, I also, I haven't found any particular assessments that I thought were like really dead on. And that's actually something we've even been thinking about of like, how do we start building out this type of assessment to again show trends and kind of high level things. But if you struggle with figuring that out yourself, I think there's also a lot of power in asking those you do life with and those around you.
That's a good word.
Because I mean, if you're, for example, there were times where I'd be on my phone during these lull or dull moments, kind of in group settings, and my friends calling me out on being on my device, even if I was just kind of doom scrolling on something. And I think depending on how immersed others are in your life, there's a lot of wisdom through that community and fellowship, even outside of accountability, of just like asking like, hey, what are y'all seeing in me?
Yeah, and I think of a couple of things that can make us more aware, maybe not completely answer the question, but make us more aware of our patterns. One thing I encourage group members is like turn off any and all notifications. I mean, maybe other than text messages or phone calls, but if you turn off all notifications, one of the things you'll start to pay attention to is what are the things that actually root or begin in my own thinking, in my own brain, that I'm the one going, oh, I'm really curious, I want to see, I want to do, because if your notifications are on, you're not even sure, is this actually coming from me or just because I constantly get messages from, Facebook or Twitter that someone has liked my post or so-and-so. And now I'm going to those places because I'm seeing something given to me. So if you turn all those off, you can start to pay attention to, I find myself, for me, one of my things, and Trevor will laugh because he knows this, but like fantasy football, I can check my team like 5-6 times a day. And nothing has happened. Like no teams have played, nothing new has occurred. But it's part of like, I'm thinking about this. And I realize like, I'm using that as a way to just kind of fill up dead time or to take a break. And I can easily be aware of it because I'm not getting notifications to go do that. And so I think everyone could use that. Or one of the things we've talked about is the practice of Sabbath, where you try to set down your phone and not use it for a day. The same kind of thing I think will happen where you will find yourself throughout the day going, I wish I could check this or see that. And those are the things we can pay attention to because they really reveal our pattern in terms of what have we relied on for, like you were saying, Jason, for just seeing what's out there, something that meets a need, that makes me feel a certain way. Because if I can take it away, even for a day, I'll start to see that pattern more clearly. So I think those are a couple things we can do to start to see what our patterns are.
Yeah. Another tool we have is called the Tech Action Plan. And just like real quick, we've done episodes on this, but the questions are, what are your top 3 to 5 goals for recovery? What devices do you use? Where do you use those devices? What websites and apps have been detrimental to your health? What websites and apps have supported your recovery? What filters, what accountability apps, who are your accountability partners? And then my favorite question is, what loopholes are you planning to take advantage of in this plan, right? That's just, it's so good. But that's a really practical tool where if we're willing to be ruthlessly honest with ourselves, we can map out our patterns really clearly. It becomes like 3D. There it is. Wow. Okay. Well, yep. So I bring my phone into the bathroom. Then after I do that, I end up looking at pornography because I was on this site, and this site while I was in the bathroom. And then later that's what happens. And so I think that's another practical tool to help us evaluate. What I love about the tool is it's not just putting yourself kind of on blast. It's also, what are things that I use for my health, and what are things I can start pursuing with technology as well.
Man, those are great ideas. And I love that action plan too. And surprised I missed that, but those are really powerful.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads into the $1 million question, Jason. So if we've started to identify our digital patterns, what does it look like to begin changing them? And maybe for some people, they feel like, can I even change them? These things have become so instinctual. Yep. I mean, some people, they've used Facebook or Instagram for years, for over a decade. And it's like, I'm unhealthy. Can I even change? What do you think? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, there's two kind of camps, not camps. There's two major areas that we want to focus on. And, when I started my own recovery journey, I think I was really focused on the behavioral change. I think I was really focused on like, man, if I cut out Tinder and Hinge or any way to use dating apps, I think that I'll make significant change. And then as I went through the 12-step process and taking inventory and all these things, it's like, man, like there's a lot here, more than it wasn't the dating app. There was truly something there. So I look at the behavioral change, and I look at the heart change. We at Leave Me Not believe both are important and necessary, right? As like, if we're talking about truly living a God-honoring life in, not even in relation to our sexuality, but in relationship and in all these areas, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And it really does start with asking yourself kind of, what changes are you trying to make? And when just on the behavioral piece, as of today, and even with what we've built out in our app, is focused around friction, right? If we're just talking about behavioral change, I think there's a lot of good that can be done from friction. And I think that goes back to the proverbial cutting off of our flesh, cutting off of our hand if it causes you to sin. And I look at it as like, you can limit and reduce, or you can eliminate. So for limit and reduce, that's where you get things like people using screen time, right, for iOS. That's where for us, we have the tracking of time and then notifications to the user, but also to their accountability partner. So one more friction is the idea that, hey, it's not just me who's going to be seeing this, but it's Jack, and man, Jack is committed to my journey, so on and so forth, right? So you're adding friction in a way based on, at least right now, based on time, but you can do that more of like, hey, we're going to lock you and block you if you exceed your limit. But then the other piece is like the elimination, right? Okay, how does that work? So, I mean, those are going to be things like, I'm just going to delete this thing once and for all. I'm going to get rid of my Facebook profile. I'm going to shut down Twitter. I'm going to, I mean, what the techless guys, I know it's kind of a different positioning when we think about children, but I know there's people out there who use or look to the Wise phone as a way of like, talk about friction. I'm just not even going to have anything on my phone other than Maps or Spotify or whatever they have right now. And like just practically for me, when maybe 2-3 years ago, I initially thought, hey, Leave Me Not just on Android right now. So I said, hey, if I use this browser app to track when I go to Facebook, that'll help make a shift in my behavior. And it was working, but it wasn't as effective. And then I was like, man, what if I just get rid of Facebook? And then I deactivated Facebook, but then I found myself reactivating Facebook. And then I said, you know what? I'm just going to give my Facebook password to my best friend, who's one of my accountability partners. I'm going to have him change the password and the number associated with with the account, so I can never get in. And if I want to get in, he has to give me the password and he has to go change it again. So that's just on the behavioral side, right? It's like, and I think those go a long way. Is how can I add friction in what makes it harder for me to do something or makes it easier for me to do something else that is hopefully harder for the bad and better for the good. And then you have, of course, and I think this is kind of more abstract, but the heart change, right? Of like, hey, if we're truly getting to the root of our brokenness, and as we dig deeper and deeper and further and understand the why behind what we're doing, I think you're going to see there's kind of more long lasting change in understanding and recognizing what we're not just what we're turning to, but like, hey, I'm choosing in this moment to not be on this application because I understand the why is, man, I'm seeking the approval of women that ultimately will never be satisfying. Right. And like that has a completely different impact on someone than just saying, man, well, I don't want to hook up with anyone, so I'm just going to cut out these apps. I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, I think, one of my favorite authors, Daniel Coyle, in his book called The Talent Code, like literally maps out how we get into patterns, like what happens in the brain, the process of myelination. And he says that statistically, scientifically, it's impossible to unlearn a habit that you've learned. The only way to do that is to replace it with a new habit. And we know that, here at Pure Desire, it's a part of the recovery process. And so I think, to use some of the language you were using earlier, Nick, I think if we understand our pattern, we can go back to the beginning of that pattern, identify what are the things that start this cycle for me, and then choose to do something intentionally different. Like instead of going to Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, YouTube, whatever, maybe it's LinkedIn, who knows, do something else. Like, okay, when this happens, maybe it's I walk out of it. I've identified that every time I have a meeting with my boss, I start to feel this way, and this is what starts the pattern. Okay, so you have a plan that after your meeting with your boss next week, you're going to reach out to a friend instead of go onto your phone. You may still be using your device, your technology, but to reach out and connect with somebody else. And so I think that that's how we start to rewire our brain, is replacing old patterns with new ones. And I think that that's when we're going to start to see real change happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for us, a lot of people come and they're kind of stuck in that binge purge cycle, and the binge, so I really appreciate what you said about those differences between limiting and reducing versus eliminating. Because I think a lot of us, when we were in the binge purge, all we knew was eliminate, and kind of that scorched earth policy of like, all right, never again, and none of this stuff, and I'll never use it. And then, we have a good stretch, whether that's a couple of days or weeks or months or whatever we defined as being a good stretch. And we're like, oh, I'm doing better. And then like we just let all the stuff back in, and we find ourselves right back into the binge cycle. So we purge by I'll use nothing ever again. And then we binge because we just let it all back. And we haven't really learned a healthy balance of what are the distinctions between things that probably do need to be eliminated and other things I would benefit from limiting and reducing, and actually having it be a game plan that I'm walking in versus a forever kind of decision. Because I think when we see it as a forever decision, a lot of us don't keep to those, because a month later we feel differently and so we change it. But that's why I also like so much what we do with the 3 circles tool, and having people identify that as a kind of a living, breathing tool that every couple of months you want to look over it, and with an accountability partner or with a spouse, if you're married, to just ask, how is this plan working for me? Are there things that I've thought of as guardrails that I'm now realizing really need to go into my inner circle and be, off limits, that those are relapses, and vice versa? Are there things I used to think of as relapses that now could be guardrails, and I might have a better relationship with them? And if every few months I've kind of got that ability to look at where am I at, then our plan is growing along with us. Versus just assuming I'm going to make some choices today and never do it again and I'll be better. Because the other thing I try to encourage group members is you don't need to have a forever plan. You need to have a for now plan. that for now, if I'm in if I'm in month one of recovery, my plan might look very different than if I'm in year 5 of recovery. And so just having that mindset of what do I need to do in this season for now? Is it eliminate or is it limit and reduce? And I think those are just really powerful conversations to have with people that are close enough to us and care about us to help us really make wise decisions.
And I think it's important to make the distinction that just because it's not a forever plan, but a for now plan, that doesn't mean that the stuff for now doesn't actually become a forever thing. Like, I'm convinced Instagram and Twitter will not be something that it's good for me. It's just not good patterns for me. And I know that because I've tried to kind of dip my toe back in. It's like, nah, this is nope, nope. Like, go back. And so I think that just to make sure that people know that sometimes some of the for now things can be a for forever thing, but that's something that you've processed with people and that are going to set you up for health.
Yeah. And just to add to that is, just before this podcast, someone was asking me like, man, do you think you'll ever go back to dating apps? And that's exactly, that had turned from a for now, right? A season of like, of let me not date and especially not use technology to enhance that process, to now like I don't see a world where that would ever make sense again. But it's possible, but it's not my motivation or desire.
Praise the Lord that people can still date and meet and connect offline. And get married and start families, right?
Yes. For my sake.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, okay, how do we know, and this is a good kind of like looking back mile marker type of question, how do we know we've taken steps into digital wellness? And how does life look different when we've established some of those healthy digital patterns?
Yeah. I think, man, hopefully this is not too simple of an initial question or kind of thing to ask yourself, but well, are we doing more of what's life-giving and good? And are we doing less of what takes life away, right? Of what's hurting us or damaging us and those around us. And I think that when we are moving towards a state of being more digitally well, right, or interacting intentionally and with technology in a healthier sense, then I do think that we'll start to see a shift in a lot of our, like those 6 pillars, right? Those areas where I think we'll start to see certain emotion shift, right? Of, if even things like lethargy to like, okay, I have actually more time and energy and mind space to be productive or to interact with others. We'll start seeing, I think, even ourselves doing less of course, the less of the things that we know are impacting us and hurting us, right? Like, okay, I'm spending less time on YouTube before I go to bed, and that's actually allowing me to sleep better, and I feel more revived and energized in the morning. So I think so. A lot of it has to, again, be kind of what are we seeing in ourselves, and what are those patterns and habits that we have created through technology that we have now replaced or that we've started to adjust. And I think even celebrating those small things of, hey, I don't spend an hour anymore on Facebook. Or sorry, let's say someone says, I don't spend 5 hours a day on Facebook anymore. I spend 4 hours. And I don't spend 4 hours now. I just spend an hour. Like, man, as maybe more inclined as I've been in the past to chuckle at that, I think there's victory there, and there's things to celebrate of like, hey, I'm reducing the things that are taking life away from me as I've identified that. And how do we see a different life when we see these healthier digital patterns? I think it goes back to, well, how was technology hurting you to begin with, right? Of like, was it affecting your relationship with your spouse? Was it affecting how you were interacting with work, right? With your employer, with productivity, with how was it shifting the bitterness and resentment you felt towards those around you because you were constantly engaged in your Facebook feed or debates, right, with others over posts. I mean, I just think there's a lot of nuance there, but the core is the same of like, well, what are we seeing that is shifting and changing? And I think it does go back to, I don't think there's an objective definition necessarily for I am digitally well. I think you have to, again, you ask yourself, and don't ask yourself that question in a vacuum, right? It's like I think all three of us understand the beauty of accountability and community, and constantly and ensuring that those around you can be speaking life and truth into that too.
Totally.
And then,
Yeah, I always think back to a story I remember from my childhood of, maybe my teenage years, that my mom would always go through these periods where she would not drink coffee. And I remember asking her about that once, like, I've noticed sometimes you drink coffee, and then other times it's like you go a week or two and you don't. And she said, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not like addicted to it, that I don't require it to be healthy and awake, but that I can enjoy it. And as I look back at that, I think how remarkable it is, because I'm a long, long ways from that on coffee. But in that regard, maybe someday, Mom, maybe I'll work on my coffee addiction. But I do think there's something to be said, particularly like for social media and technology, is if we find that we can lay it down for a few days, a week, or even a month, and really not have this gaping hole in our life, like, oh my goodness, I need that. That's a really positive sign of health. And I would even encourage that if you're looking at, okay, I need to get off Twitter for a week because maybe you've figured out a way that you limit and reduce, and you're like, is this something that I have a healthier relationship with now? And you go off Twitter for a week. Are you every day just thinking about, I got to go on, I got to check? It's like, okay, that's probably an indication there's still some significant hooks there versus not really missing it. These guys know a little bit, and I don't know if I've ever said it on this podcast, but I used to have, I don't know if it'd be I had a compulsion that I really liked to play Clash of Clans on my phone. And I would, in spare time, I'd be playing this game. And I kind of had that moment of like, has this game taken a little bit too much of my life and control? And so can I lay it down, and will I miss it or not? And I think that was encouraging to me, is that after, the first day I kept thinking about, I should go check. I'm like, no, I'm taking a break. And then after that first day, it was like, I didn't even really think about it. It wasn't connected to my life. It wasn't something I needed. And I've been encouraged by that in a lot of areas, just to see, like, do I need this to survive? And to be clear, I'm saying this specifically about things that we wouldn't identify in and of themselves of being harmful, because that is the kind of language, like, of someone who's looked at porn a lot or been a drug addict or alcoholic. They're like, hey, I've gone 2 weeks without alcohol or 2 weeks without porn. I'm good. And then we think we're safe. So I'm not talking those categories, because in those categories, our goal is that never again will I go back to them. We're more looking at what are the possible trigger points or entry points. And if it's something that we can't lay down without totally missing it and wanting to go back, then I think we're realizing there's still some unhealth there. So just some ideas and practices to say, hey, go without it for a while. And if you realize, like, wow, my life is just as full. I have activities that I do, things that I occupy my time with, I'm not missing anything, then really take that encouragement to say, man, I've arrived at a much healthier place with how I'm using this technology.
I remember when I first got off of social media, I felt kind of like I was missing out. Not kind of. I felt like I was missing out. It's like, I don't know what's going on in all of my friends' lives and whatever. It's like, you have 1,500 friends or whatever on Facebook. It's like, Trev, you don't have that many friends, man. But like what I found is I would ask updates. Like I'd see my friend Justin, or I'd see my friend Chris or Bob or whatever. And I'd be like, hey, how's life going? And for me, I found that I wasn't like finding all that information on their feeds. I was asking them face to face, like, what's going on? What's up? Talk to me, and knowing that. And I didn't set out for that to take place. I just found myself like, I'm just as curious as I was before about what's going on in their life. But now I have to like do that intentional step of texting or calling or going out to coffee or meeting or whatever. And I think for me, that was an indicator. It's like, okay, like I actually don't need that in my life. Like I still have the friends I want to have. And if heaven forbid, I need to know what happened on Facebook, I can be like, Amy, my wife, any updates on this person's life? She'd be like, no, great. Okay, cool. And I can just keep going on, with my day. So I think things like that, like I love what you're saying about identifying small victories or small wins, because it's not going to be like right in your face. You are digitally well. I think that you need to just evaluate consistently.
And again, I didn't plan this. Right before this podcast, one friend was walking in the bathroom. He was playing Clash of Clans on the toilet here in the office. So. And then another friend asked me about, man, you should be, he just asked me, he's like, dude, you need to go on TikTok. And I was like, I don't see any world where TikTok is ever going to help me. And thank God I've come to a place where hearing that I scoff at versus I think maybe even a few years ago, similar idea of like, I'm missing out. I need to be a part of this.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good stuff. And I'm sure now I'm going to get razzed on for claiming I liked Clash of Clans.
Dude, everybody did. Gosh, it was a good game.
I'm talking like a year ago, so not like a long time back when it was still really popular. So Jason, we've talked a lot about it, and you've mentioned, what you're doing with Lead Me Not, but share a little bit more about your organization. How do you help in this whole area of digital health? What does Lead Me Not do? And maybe in particular for our listeners, because so many of them are accustomed to accountability software like Covenant Eyes, Accountable to You, all those programs. How does Lead Me Not compare to those? And is this like a both and, like where someone might use both, or is it something that they could use in place of? How do you view that?
Yeah. So, at Lead Me Not, we want to help the world understand the why behind their digital behavior. And by understanding that why, eliminate what is unhealthy or destructive through technology. And we use radical transparency, accountability, and introspection to guide that process. So, right now, if you go on Google Play and you search Lead Me Not, we're positioning ourselves specifically for there's two use cases, right? We have the unwanted sexual behavior, and then we have unhealthy digital usage. If you download the app, you go through onboarding, you're going to be asked, are you one of the two? Are you both? And right now we're positioning more for the first, right? For the unwanted sexual behavior. And the way that we're helping guys and girls attack this is by really trying to take a super personalized approach and holistic approach to digital wellness, but focused on the areas that are problematic or that you want to find freedom from. So for the first use case, or how we initially interact with, you do need to have an accountability partner that you can add to the platform. You set like, hey, what is the why behind my journey, right? What am I doing this? And then we ask, hey, what are your trigger points, right? What are areas that you've already identified as being triggering, right? You select certain websites, certain apps, or certain emotions. And, similar to some of these accountability solutions, we run in the background right now. We're monitoring your behavior. We're alerting the accountability partner, but we're also every evening prompting the user to reflect and introspect. And how was your day? Did you act out in some regard? And if you did, what triggered you, right? And what led you down that path? And so at the end of the day, we are still pointing back to relationship, right? We're pointing back to community, but we're also trying to use technology to aid in our fight on the behavioral side, right? Which is, you could say, the monitoring, the alerting, and then we also have the heart change, and what does that look like to replace. So we have a lot of users right now who are using Lead Me Not as their sole wellness platform just for Android. But then you also have guys and girls who are using us in addition to solutions like Covenant Eyes or Accountable to You, because we can't run on other devices yet. And then you also have people, I know of users who use Fortify, right? That's another one in addition to us, because Fortify is asking them more questions beyond what we're asking, or they have specific content that you can go through. And again, my vision, our vision, is to have Lead Me Not become this kind of one-stop shop and platform where you're not just doing all these friction things of making it hard to do stuff, but you're actually being prompted and taking steps towards replacing that with life-giving behavior. And are we asking the right questions? What kind of content, pushing out the right content to our users? And then also, as I've talked about before, being more AI driven, right? Where it's like, hey, now we're starting, when we talk about helping users understand their why, how can we aid technology how can we use technology in a redemptive way? And I think data is a big way you can do that, to say, man, here, look at all these patterns and trends we've identified that probably open up a whole new way of thinking of how you think about your digital behavior. So
IBM guy, remember? IBM guy, data.
Not an engineer.
They're all the same to me. Like, no offense to engineers out there. They're all the same to me.
Okay.
Jason, where can people, because obviously they're going to love this content. They love what you got to say, and Lead Me Not is such a great platform for this. Where can people find more information on you, on Lead Me Not? Where can they get all that?
Yeah, so first is our app, right? So if the Android folks out there, you download, install, create an account. And if it's not through the app, then our website, right? leadmenot.org. I have an Instagram that we've done some really cool IG lives with folks that have, I think even a few that have, maybe one or two that have been a part of or interacted with the Pure Desire Ministries. But between the app, website, and Instagram, kind of this is where you're going to get kind of the major updates and hopefully even using Lead Me Not as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm just waiting for the iOS, man. That's all I'm going to say. I'm waiting for the iOS. Get on there, man. Let's do it. Jason, it's been great, man, to get to know you a little bit more, hear your heart. And I think this is a good conversation. Though some of this stuff may not feel directly tied to recovery from sexual addiction or healing from betrayal trauma, our digital patterns do impact it. Absolutely. That's such a significant way. So thanks for your time. Thanks for the work that you do. And thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.